Today on the show, are you rich? We discuss what makes people think you are, and we'll talk about Donald Trump's pick for the Supreme Court and his place in various pieces of American history.
Can't you see? Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
Let's go!
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born!
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
Ah, come on. Really? Really? We got to be better than this. I mean, I would hope we're better than this. Maybe we're not better than this. Is this what we become? Is this how far we've fallen? Is this the end result of politicians so successfully dividing us? And by the way, this is not a left and right thing. This is not to do with Republicans or Democrats or any of the camps that our politicians have so successfully separated us into, preventing us from talking to one another, preventing us from moving forward together, preventing us from discovering the commonalities that we share, having an enriching discussion with people that believe different things than us and learning things from them. Politicians want us having none of that. Politicians want us scared of each other. Politicians want us kept in our own separate corners so they can milk us for money and votes. So much easier when we're not talking to each other. But this isn't a partisan issue. This isn't to do with the left or the right or the groups that we've been divided into. This is about us as Americans being better. We have to be better. I hope we're better. Maybe we're not anymore. We have to be able to pick matters of principle. We must focus on building things as opposed to tearing down what other people are trying to build. We're only damaging ourselves. We're only setting ourselves back. What are we talking about? Now, you would imagine this has something to do with the SCOTUS pick. We're going to wait till the dust settles on that one a little bit. Lots of people screaming and yelling. Lots of people screaming and yelling about all sorts of stuff and things that they're angry about and outraged about. And, well, it's just par for the course. And on this show, we like to be the cooler head that prevails. We like to take things in. And there's a lot of people screaming and yelling. There's a lot of the madding crowd doing what the madding crowd does. And on this show, well, we're more thoughtful. We're more observant. And we wait until the dust is settled before we get all heavy-handed with this sort of thing. So we're going to wait. But there was one thing that happened actually before Trump's SCOTUS pick was announced that made me think, come on, we have to be better than this. Now, what happened had to do with the Women's March. And if you've listened to this show for any length of time, you know that one of the central pillars of everything that we base this show on is equality. The idea that we don't have equality in the year 2018 is absolutely ridiculous. It's beneath us as a country. The idea that people have to fight to be who they are is beneath us as a country. The idea that people with a different color of skin, from a different economic background, from a different family, of a different race, of a different gender, of a different religion, the idea that any of these folks would have to fight to be who they are, would have to fight for equality, is embarrassing, and it's beneath us. It was supposed to be Abraham Lincoln's problem, and, well, the fact that we're still dealing with it in 2018 is horrific. It's embarrassing is what it is. And I'm all in favor of the Women's March. The Women's March did something incredibly powerful, and you may be a huge supporter of the Women's March. You might think it's more smoke and mirrors and a way of inciting the masses and more of a political tool than actually about equality. But when the Women's March gather the way the Women's March do, and women in such tremendous numbers, not just in America, but all over the world, come together to say, we have to fight to be just who we are. That's tremendously emotionally powerful. So I love the Women's March. I love the women that are part of the Women's March. But this is one of those instances where we've got to do better. We have to be more thoughtful than this. We have to focus on what we can build as opposed to what we can tear down. The Women's March sent out a press release opposing Trump's SCOTUS pick. Did you see this? Here's the thing. Here's the problem. It was pre-written, and they forgot to plug in the name. They didn't know who it was going to be. They just knew that the moment it was announced, they were going to tear it down. But like I said, when they sent out the press release, they forgot to add the name to the document. So the press release reads, in response to Donald Trump's nomination of XX, it's actually what it says, to the Supreme Court of the United States, the Women's March releases the following statement. And I get that they thought they wouldn't like Donald Trump's pick for the Supreme Court, but we, as Americans, we have to be more thoughtful. We have to be better than this. We have to concentrate on, like I said, what we can build. We can't be all cocked and loaded, ready to just rip everything to shreds that someone that voted differently than us believes. We cannot be so quick to declare fellow Americans with differing beliefs the enemy. Yes, I understand. A fight for equality is so important. And it's safe to assume that what the Women's March is trying to achieve was going to be opposed by a Donald Trump Supreme Court justice pick. But we have to be better than this.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So like I said, it was an indicator, a microcosm of what I consider to be the problem with America at the moment. I don't know what you believe politically. Quite frankly, I don't care. If you treat me well and you treat other people well, you're not hurting anybody else, well, who am I to judge? Answer, I am no one to judge. I think one of the interesting things about Donald Trump is he's such a divisive individual that it tests our humanity in a lot of ways. It's the easy way out to go, Donald Trump is evil. Anybody who voted for Donald Trump is evil. You voted for Donald Trump, I no longer talk to you. I don't want to be your friend on Facebook. If you're that type of person, then I don't need you. I don't know. That's selling your fellow Americans short. I've never once made a friend and known who they voted for before becoming their friend. Have you? I mean, look, in these politicized times, yeah, probably. But I don't remember as a child, I don't remember as a young adult, I don't remember as an adult ever going, hey, nice to meet you, who'd you vote for? Well, we can or cannot be friends. There have been many times where I've met someone, gotten to be their friend, and then find out some interesting stuff about them that tests my humanity a little bit. But ultimately, I wind up thinking that friendship is a much bigger deal than party politics. There are people on either side of the political fence that have behaved despicably in the name of politics. And you'd have to be blind to see that some of the more despicable parts of America, you'd have to be blind not to have noticed that some of the more despicable, hateful, racist parts of America have attached themselves to Donald Trump. But you know what? This is why this time is a test of our humanity. This is why this time is a moment where we have to be better. We have to rise above. It's something we talk about on this show a lot. And it's something that bears repeating. And sadly, it bears repeating because of the time that we live in where we're so easily divided. There's got to be folks that voted completely differently than you, that have a whole different set of beliefs, that you could be great friends with. I'm sure there's family members that deal with this all the time. This is not new ground we're trotting on here. But it's exacerbated ground, what with Trump's SCOTUS pick. And with instances like the Women's March sending out a press release opposing Trump's SCOTUS pick, except for the fact that it was pre-written and they forgot to plug the name in. So the press release reads, in response to Donald Trump's nomination of XX to the Supreme Court of the United States, the Women's March releases the following statement. It's that knee-jerk reactionary thing where whatever you believe, it's wrong, and we're going to do our very best to tear it down. Man, like I said, we've got to do better and be better. Huge supporter of the Women's March, huge supporter of equality, huge supporter of everything that they stand for. But that's a microcosm of the problem with America. And this exists on both sides. People just only too eager to rip apart anything that anybody that voted differently than they did said. And I don't remember ever having to qualify friendship. I don't remember ever having to get a list of someone's political beliefs before I decided to be friends with them. So here I am again, the way I feel I often am in these situations, asking you to do a little bit more, to be a little bit more. You might have a big problem with Donald Trump's SCOTUS pick. You might be entitled to have a big problem with Donald Trump's SCOTUS pick. And it's weird, it's so weird that a Supreme Court justice, something that is supposed to be about just that, justice in America, has become so radically politicized that a person's beliefs could hold in its hands the fate of a nation because of the weird way the Supreme Court works. It's supposed to be about justice and law. But it's not. It's become about divisive party politics, and that's just weird, and that's just sad. But everything's politicized in this day and age. It's ridiculous. So I guess I'm asking you to stop, think. Consider that every person you're dealing with is a human being. Every person you're dealing with is a lot like you. Every person wants the same thing. Everybody wants a roof over their head. Everybody wants a job, hopefully a job that they find to be meaningful. If we have kids, we want our kids to have a shot. We want our kids to have a shot at an education and a real life. We all want the same stuff. We just might have a different idea of the best way to get there. But if we can talk to one another the way the politicians don't want us to, because it makes their life so much more easy when we don't, if we can talk to each other and bear in mind that we want the same things, there's a good chance that we can get there quicker. So please, don't send out your own press release in your mind before the name of the nominee is released. Does that make sense? I hope it does.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radio Land. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, as the rest of the country sort of struggles to get up to speed on Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court nominee suggested by President Trump on Monday night, as the rest of the country tries to kind of read the cliff notes on this guy, our listeners in Florida, in places like Palm Beach and Orlando, are very familiar with this guy because, well, as the Miami Herald pointed out in a really interesting article, he's had a lot to do with some pretty specific and historically notable Florida moments. Brett Kavanaugh, nominated by Donald Trump on Monday night to the U.S. Supreme Court, he's a name that you probably know if you're one of the people listening in Florida. Do you remember this? Are you casting your mind back, trying to remember where you might have heard his name before? In the year 2000, he represented, for free, did it pro bono, the relatives of one 6-year-old Elian Gonzalez. Yeah, do you remember this? I mean, it's kind of hard to forget. He represented Elian Gonzalez's Miami relatives, who wanted to keep Elian Gonzalez in Miami, despite the fact that Elian's father wanted to have custody of him in Cuba. He lost that one. Kavanaugh lost that fight when Elian was removed from his uncle's little Havana house by federal agents. You remember the scene, right? You remember seeing the pictures. Guns drawn, going after a 6-year-old kid in the hours before sun came up on April 22nd, 2000, the Saturday before Easter Sunday. Do you remember how we as a nation were so enwrapped in that? It was a big deal. Back in 1999, those fishermen, they found Elian, who was just 5 years old, floating on an inner tube in the middle of the freaking ocean. He had been in this little boat that carried 14 people from Cuba, including his mom. And all these other folks, including Elian's mom, died at sea. And this was a big deal. This was a huge deal. It was an international incident. And all of South Florida was caught up in it. It was an incredibly polarizing thing, specifically for the Cuban community in South Florida. A lot of folks went, you can't send this kid back to Fidel Castro's Cuba. Other people said, his dad's in Fidel Castro's Cuba. Child needs to be with his father. Yeah, that was Kavanaugh's thing. And he lost. He was trying to keep Elian in America. I don't know how that jives with your political beliefs. I don't know which side you fall down on with regard to the political fence. I don't know what you felt when Elian was here in America and people were saying he should have been removed from the country and taken back to Cuba to be with his father. It was a deeply divisive thing. But it's an interesting one only because a lot of people would say that in 2018, a guy like Kavanaugh, nominated by Trump, would have been on a different side of that argument as opposed to pro bono representing Elian Gonzalez and his American family here, trying to keep the kid in America. So it's an interesting one. It kind of makes us wonder about where his head's at now. And it's kind of a decent reminder for us to not prejudge a situation and assume that we know exactly where things are going to go. And then, do you remember this one? Again with Florida. The presidential election between George Bush and Al Gore. The Florida votes were undecided. We were there without knowing what the future of our country would be in December because of the unbelievably tiny margin of the election results. Do you remember pregnant Chads, hanging Chads? How that absolutely enveloped the country in the year 2000? It was an interesting one. I remember going out election night, and I was young at the time, really young at the time, but I remember feeling like it was a part of history. So I went and bought newspapers, thinking that there might be an announcement about who was going to be president of the United States of America that could be wrong, and maybe I could save that newspaper and it'd be worth something moving forward. But yeah, there was that state-mandated recount because of things like pregnant and hanging Chads, and the fact that the fate of a nation hung in the balance. And it took us, as a country, an embarrassingly long time to reach a conclusion. But you know who was part of George Bush's legal team, which was trying to stop the ballot recount in Florida? That was Kavanaugh. Yep, it's true. You remember Jeb Bush? Now, if you're in Florida, you remember all this stuff. Remember Jeb Bush? He had this rather sort of controversial move where he was going to set up school voucher programs that would direct public money to private religious schools. And Kavanaugh represented Jeb Bush on that score. And in 2003, George Bush, president at the time, you will recall, nominated Kavanaugh for the United States Court of Appeals. So that's what we know thus far with regard to Kavanaugh. And like I said, if you're one of the people that listens in Florida, Orlando, or Palm Beach, or one of those places, there's a very good chance that you are familiar with his previous work. Kavanaugh also investigated President Bill Clinton, and he was the lead author of the Starr Report, which was all about Bill Clinton getting up to no good in the outside of the bounds of matrimony, physical activities he liked to indulge in back in the day. Yeah, he was the lead author of the Starr Report, which chronicled Bill Clinton's extramarital bedroom activities. Well, as we know, not everything went down in the bedroom. So the guy's had his fingerprints all over a whole bunch of historically significant things in America. You know, it's interesting. George Bush, a lot of people look at George Bush and go, oh man, I don't want to deal with Donald Trump. Bring back the good old days of George Bush. George Bush and the Bush family have been kind of anti-Trump at a lot of different turns. George Bush was all about this. Kavanaugh served as Bush's staff secretary, where he led the administration's effort to identify and confirm judicial nominees. He served that position while he was nominated to the D.C. Appeal Court, but the confirmation hearings were stalled for 3 years. Kavanaugh was nominated to the D.C. Appeals Court in 2003, but he wasn't confirmed until 2006. Over those 3 years, he joined the Bush White House as a staff secretary. George W. Bush dropped a statement about Kavanaugh, saying, President Trump has made an outstanding decision in nominating Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Brett is a brilliant jurist who has faithfully applied the Constitution and laws throughout his 12 years on the D.C. Circuit. He is a fine husband, father, and friend. He will make a superb justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. So there you go. There are all sorts of people that were... The politics makes strange freaking bedfellows. It really does. There are all sorts of people that were like, bring back George Bush. Democrats going, we love George Bush. We thought he was the devil at the time, but now we see that compared to Donald Trump, he was just freaking dandy, and we would like a guy like him back in the White House. And the Bush family has had a problem with a lot of the things that Donald Trump has done. I think, obviously, there was a huge divide when it came to the Bush family with regard to Jeb Bush. I mean, that was over and done with rather quickly. But, you know, if you're going to support your brother, then you have to kind of give Donald Trump a hard time for some of the hideous things he said and did to Jeb Bush. What was it, like, you low energy fatso or something like that? I don't remember, but it was weird. Politics created strange bedfellows, because there were lots of Democrat types who were like, man, bring back the good old days of George W. Yeah, he was a buffoon. Yeah, he did things that we thought were horrible and illegal, but at least he did it in a way that made it feel like he cared about us. At least he seemed like he was at least pretending to be a decent human being. Now those folks are singing a different tune because George Bush is all in favor of Kavanaugh. Now, where do we stand on Kavanaugh in this situation? Look. The idea of a Supreme Court justice being around until they die is something that I do not understand. And maybe I could understand it if the idea of being a Supreme Court justice was a little bit more pure, if it had something to do that closer approximated justice and the law and a legal interpretation of the Constitution. And maybe that was the idea back in the day when we made justices until they died or until they decided to hang it up. But the idea that you get one of these folks for life is just beyond me. It makes no freaking sense. With the way it's become so heavily politicized, and to be honest, the way it's been heavily politicized for the entirety of my adult lifetime, I do not, for the life of me, get why we still get them until they croak or give up. So, that, I suppose, is really where I'm at with the Supreme Court justice and the general idea of the Supreme Court justice. Why the hell are we stuck with them for life? They have an integral part. They have an integral role to play, rather, in the fate of our nation. And if we don't like the job they're doing, we should be able to tell them to sling their hook. No taxation without representation. No people deciding what the hell we do with our lives without accountability. And that's the weird thing about being a Supreme Court justice. Once you're in there, there's a certain lack of accountability. So it's something that I don't fully understand. But what I am called to do in these situations where people are so deeply angry and people are so deeply divided and people just want to burn it all down, it would seem, is ask people to take a beat, take a breath, think about their next move. Think about what's going to get you closer to things that you want. Will it be anger and vitriol? Will it be tearing down what other people have tried to build? Or will it be thought and planning and talking to other folks? What's the best way to have your argument heard? If someone screams at you, what's your initial response? This person's a crazy person. Why the hell are they yelling at me? This makes no sense. I'm not really listening to what they're saying. I'm just noticing that they're screaming and yelling a lot. F them. That's what happens when someone screams and yells at you. But if someone comes up to you and says, hey, can I have a moment of your time? We're both involved in this thing, and man, I respect how you feel about it. But I'm coming from a rather different place. And I don't expect to change your mind, but could you just listen to how I feel about this? And then maybe we could sort of, get a little closer on some of this stuff. That's what's going to move us further down the field. And it seems so silly that the rules laid down in childhood are forgotten. But we're being encouraged to forget them. Donald Trump is asking his folks to give as good as they get when people accost him in the street. Give it back to him. Give him the old 1-2. Stand up to them. Yell back. Have some stones. When protesters bother you in a restaurant, don't leave the restaurant. Go, I'm going to eat here and you're going to like it, bitch. It's not a helpful, productive thing. Nor is it a helpful or productive thing when the Maxine Waters of this world say, God's on our side, let them know they're not welcome. And so the Supreme Court justice situation will affect our future. There's no two ways about it. But right now, I think the main thing that I feel called to do is to point out the fact that screaming and yelling, raising voices, blowing your cool is going to do nothing for us as Americans, and it's going to do nothing for you as a person. Finding a way to communicate, finding a way to coexist, finding a way to have your point of view heard without putting someone on the defense, we're going to get a lot farther, a lot faster that way, no matter who you voted for, no matter who you want to see as a Supreme Court justice.
Sometimes you just know you're done. You're longing for that shining sun. You walk these streets most every day. You're waiting to get washed away.
Radio. Radio. 104.1.
Now, more AD on the radio.
Back once again, the ill behavior. Delivering and giving you my musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD. And can't nobody rock a body better than me. Back once again.
So do you have a degree? Do you think it's important to have a degree? Are you an employer? Are you willing to hire people without college degrees? If you're like me, you've never really understood the American preponderance on the college degree. I mean, it's great to get a college degree, but it becomes so cost prohibitive. And, well, I mean, ultimately, really, do you care if your lawyer was 2 PE credits away from finishing off his college degree? No, you don't. You care about his ability to interpret the law in your favor. You care about his ability to keep you safe in negotiations with regard to the letter of the law. And, for that reason, I'm glad that, and look, obviously, you need to get a degree if you're going to be a lawyer. But is that necessary? I don't think so. I think we're moving away from that, though. I mean, you see more and more sort of, they're kind of trade schools. And in the digital age, this is an incredibly useful thing. What do people want to do? Do they want to go to college? Do they want to be well-rounded? Do they want to test out a bunch of different things? Do they want an English lit credit? Or do they know that they want to work in the tech field and they want to work in coding? No, they want to work in coding. They know that in a couple of years, maybe less than that, they can get certified and educated with regard to how to code up apps, and they can be making a significant chunk of money. Do you want to spend 4 years in school figuring that out? Or do you know a little bit more about what you want to do with yourself and you want to get to that as quickly as possible? Look, if you're like me, you're all in favor of the idea of college. I didn't go to college. I wish I would have gone to college. I love the idea of learning for learning's sake, but that's a bit of an unnecessary luxury in this day and age. Just because it really has become that. The idea of a college education has become so prohibitively expensive, a lot of people aren't getting them. Now, if you could just go to college and learn and have it be something reasonable, great. But it's less and less reasonable, which is why I suppose the idea of people picking up trades, people picking up certifications, people picking up, the ability to go out into the workforce and make money in their chosen field without having to get that, intramural lacrosse credit so that you can graduate. I think that's a good thing. But it's become indicative of how prohibitively expensive a college degree is that there is now a game show where the winners have their student loans paid off. Yeah, it's true. How exactly does this work? It's a fascinating one. We'll get into it in just a little bit. The game show that pays off your student loans. Before we do, though, let's take another listen. You might have heard this the other day, but it's so incredibly germane to this topic. Let's take another listen to John Mulaney talking about the value of his English degree.
An English major. I paid $120,000. How dare you clap? How dare you clap for the worst financial decision I ever made in my life? I paid $120,000 for someone to tell me to go read Jane Austen, and then I didn't. That's the worst use of $120,000 I can possibly fathom. Other than if you bought a duffel bag of fake cocaine. No, I take it back. That's a better use of the money. Because I know you'd be disappointed when you open up the duffel bag and you realize it's not real cocaine. It's like powdered baby aspirin or whatever they do. But at least you have baby aspirin. And maybe you have a baby. And one day your baby goes, "Oh, my head." And you go, "Hey, I got something for you. Come here, little guy." And you dump it out on a mirror. You make it nice for the baby. You make it nice. You cut it up into lines, and your baby takes a sippy cup straw, and he holds it in his little ravioli-sized baby fist, and he leans over, and he snorts up the baby aspirin, and he gets rid of his baby headache, plus you get a duffel bag. That is way better than walking across a stage at graduation hung over in a gown to accept a certificate for reading books that I didn't read. Strolling across a stage, the sun in my eyes, my family watching as I sweat vodka and ecstasy to receive a 4-year degree in a language that I already spoke.
So I suppose that might be a bit of an extreme case. But look, there's a genuine crisis with regard to education. It would be great if education or that degree was affordable. Guess what? It's less and less affordable with every passing day. It would be great if employers would go, "We don't need to know that you got a degree. We just need to know that you're qualified to do this job. Did you pass this course and this course and this course? Oh, good. That's all we require. You don't have to have that big end of a 4-year exercise and time-wasting piece of paper that illustrates the fact that you managed to stuck to it even through all the meaningless underwater basket weaving classes. We just need to know that you're going to do and be able to do what we hired you to do." And very few politicians seem interested in finding solutions for the student debt crisis, so the folks over at True TV have stepped up with a new game show that will try and solve the problem one student at a time with a game show. Yeah, a game show. This is where we're at. But you know what? At least they're doing something. It's called Paid Off, and I think it premieres tonight. It's a question and answer type show where the contestants are young adults in their late 20s and early 30s who are saddled with significant student loans. And instead of prizes, the show will reward winners by paying off their loans. It's unclear how that's going to work, but it sounds like the amount that the winner gets for their debt depends on how well they do. The producers actually looked into paying off the loans with creditors directly, but the logistics and tax implications got too complicated, so the winners will just get a check like a normal game show. How insane is that, right? How prohibitive is that? How indicative of how prohibitive an education has become is that. If someone wants to pay off your student loans, they can't. They got to give you a check, and then you've got to be trusted to pay off your student loans yourself. Naturally, this might seem a little dark to some people, especially because the show is mostly comedic, but the show is self-aware, and they're actually hoping this does raise awareness. Host Michael Torpey said, quote, "It's an absurd show to match an absurd crisis. A game show feels really apt because this is the state of things right now. I know what we're doing is a little ridiculous, but in a way, the show matched my family's history. The only way we could pay off student loans was because I was booked on an underwear ad as a model. That's insane." And at the end of every episode, he says, "Call your representatives right now and tell them that you need a better solution than this game show."
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The dumbing up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
So what would you say the top indicators of wealth are in America in 2018? It's an interesting one because, well, there's a bit of research done about what we consider to be the signs of wealth in America. Top sign someone is rich now versus back in 1992. Here's the thing. Top sign that someone is rich in 2018 in our eyes is tech. Back in the day, in 1992, it was food. Yeah. I guess both extravagant delicacies in their own way. And we'll discuss the top indicators that we feel someone is rich a little later on in the show. Right now, though, let's talk for a second about what to do. Let's talk for a second about what to do if you are a parent trying to keep your kids entertained over an incredibly hot summer. Have you taken your child to the zoo yet? A trip to the zoo on an unbelievably hot day is torture for the parent and the child, and probably the animals as well. I don't know if you've ever done this, but well, here's David Spade summing it up perfectly.
I went to the Phoenix Zoo. That's a good time. Phoenix Zoo is a good time. So I went there. It's 111 degrees. I'm the only species out walking around. There's nothing happening. It's a Phoenix parking lot. So I go there, and I see the chameleon. That's the first thing I see. And he's in this green cage, and he's totally green. And he doesn't have to be, and he doesn't know where he is, but he's green, and he's committed, and I respect that attitude. He's pumped up about it, too. He's like, check this out, dude. I'm totally this green. Look at me. This exact color green. This is a hard shade, too. Check it out, dude. I can't pull it off much longer. Look. It's all sweaty. I'm like, good God, he made me uncomfortable. I go, hey, psst. Relax. You're caught. You're in a cage at the zoo. Just kick back and be whatever color's most comfortable. Should have tried that in the jungle. Maybe it'd still be there. Seriously.
Yeah, zoo on a hot day during the summertime. We've all done it. We've all been forced to do it by parents. We all realized when we were kids it was a bad idea, and then we inflicted on our kids later on as a rite of passage in life. All right, what are the top signs of wealth in 2018? Here's the thing. In 2018, it has to do with tech. back in the early 90s, it had to do with food. We'll discuss the top signs of wealth today and back in the day in just a little bit, right after we get into the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. Let's you and I discuss what's going on in the world, shall we? Oh. Hey, how long do you take to get ready in the morning? How long does your significant other take to get ready in the morning? Only because, well, no matter how much you primp, no matter how much you preen, no matter how long it takes you to do your hair, no matter how long it takes you to apply your makeup, if you wear makeup, it's nothing whatsoever compared to what one rather well-known person described as just part of their morning routine. Who is it? How long is the process that they go through before they can leave the house? It's Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian's kid sister. Yeah, Kylie Jenner has gone on the record saying that she has, get this, a 37-step makeup routine. 37-step makeup routine. Which is crazy. Never would have imagined that was even possible. I am shocked. I cannot believe that Kylie Jenner can count to 37. Hey, did you hear the news in the world of science? The scientific world is all sorts of excited because a new species has been discovered. Yes, a new species. But a new species of what is the question I hear you ask. Well, this new species of animal was discovered in Indonesia, but it's something that we have here in America. It might even be something that you had as a pet. Scientists have discovered a new species of gecko in Indonesia. A new species of gecko has been discovered. And the scientist who made the discovery, a guy called Amir Hamidi, says he's very, very excited. Partially because he's made a massive leap forward in understanding the Earth's biodiversity, and partly because, well, the gecko already helped him save 15% on car insurance. Happy birthday to Sofia Vergara. Sofia Vergara's turned 46 today, so happy birthday to them. I mean, her. Anyways. Ex-NBA star Yao Ming. Remember him? If you're one of the people listening in Houston, I know you do because you saw him play on the Houston Rockets. That was one of the first Rockets games I ever saw, late in the season. Shaq, Yao, oh my gosh. Unbelievable drama. When I first moved to Houston, that was one of the first things I did, and I loved every second of it. Yao Ming was a hero to Houston then. He had a restaurant in Houston. It's called Yao's. And it was Szechuan Chinese food. And it was freaking delicious. I think it's still going in Houston. It's really, really good. If you're into that kind of thing, which personally I am, do yourself a favor and pay it a visit. Yao's in Houston, should you happen to be there. But yeah, ex-NBA star and restaurateur Yao Ming graduated from a Chinese university. He finished up with sports and he went to school. Good for him. Next, I believe he plans to do what most college grads do after they graduate. Backpack across Europe. At that height, it should take him about 6 strides. A man in India had a metal cup surgically removed from his butt. Yeah, a man in India recently had a metal cup surgically removed from his butt. Ugh. Worst cocktail party ever. I would imagine he gets absolutely no takers when he mixes up some Moscow mules. Donald Trump's personal driver for 25 years is suing him for 3,300 hours of unpaid overtime. Yeah. 3,300 hours of unpaid overtime. He should hire that Michael Avenatti guy. The one who works with Stormy Daniels. He's the attorney that you need if you've been stiffed by Trump. Hillary Clinton could be on the down low trying to run for president again. Because, you know, if at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. I don't know, man. I mean, you might be a big fan of Hillary Clinton. You might think it's a great idea. But the age factor really comes into it. It was crazy to me that the frontrunners for president of these United States of America were all past what we consider to be retirement age. And I'm not trying to be ageist, but at a certain point, the years do begin to take their toll, whether you're Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, or anybody else. And it's strange to me that people of a certain age would want to do this. I mean, Donald Trump, at his age, could kick back and retire and have a legacy. But there's this weird thing that I've noticed recently. Older people doing kind of ridiculous things, like Quincy Jones being a perfect example. Do you remember we talked about this on the show a little while back? Quincy Jones, a man who gave the world untold amounts of incredible music, did this really sort of scandalous tabloid his tabloid journalism style article where I don't even remember who published it, but he just talked smack. He spilled a bunch of dirt on giant rock stars, talked all sorts of crap about what it was like to work with Michael Jackson. It's like, you're 100 years old. Your legacy is secure. Why this desperate bid for significance so late in the game? I don't understand it, but it's something that it's something that I think makes people of a certain age a little nuts. Like, there's no reason why Donald Trump should have run for president of these United States of America. Hillary Clinton, I get it. She's felt like that was her spot for a really long time, but still, at some point, you got to start thinking about calling it a day. But they don't. They get angrier. They get older and they get more desperate for significance. You know what it's like with all these elderly political types trying to make a bid for it? Like Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani, when he was a mayor of New York, every New Yorker will tell you, you might not have agreed with his policies, but he seems so sane and measured and reasonable, and he's just gone, well, freaking overboard recently. And it seems to be in a last-minute bid for significance to secure a place in the history books. All these aging politicians that are doing ridiculous things to try and secure their legacy, you know what they remind me of? They remind me of that last preseason football game. If you're a football fan, maybe you relate to this a little bit, but the last preseason football game, a bunch of people that are about to not be in the NFL. Let's be real here. Their career as a professional football player, that fast track to never having to work again for the rest of your life, making millions of dollars, playing at an elite level that very few people ever play at, that's about to go bye-bye. So in that last game of preseason football, what do you see? You see a bunch of hopefuls doing absolutely ridiculous things, going for the craziest Hail Mary style attempts at scoring that they can, with the vain idea that they're going to get noticed and they might secure their shot to the big time because it looks like it's going away and it's going away quickly. That's what elderly politicians are like in this country to me right now. They look like they realize they're never going to play in the NFL, so they're trying to do anything, ridiculous as it may be, to secure themselves a place in the big time. It's very odd. A Starbucks employee helped deliver a baby outside of a store. I believe in her honor, the parents named the baby after her, but spelled it wrong on the birth certificate. Starbucks, did you see this? Starbucks is doing something that could affect all of our lives. Starbucks will eliminate plastic straws from all of its locations to help the environment. And you know what? Considering that Starbucks now cover about 75% of the Earth's surface, this is a big deal. It's a lot of plastic. Iran arrested a teenager for posting a video where she's dancing. In a related story, Iran is apparently now being run by John Lithgow from Footloose. All right. I think we got to talk about the sign that you're rich. What would you say is the best indicator of wealth? Pretending to be rich sounds like it was a lot cooler and easier back in the 90s. Because now it's tech. There's a new study out from the National Bureau of Economic Research that has discovered now it's tech that's an indicator of wealth. Back in the day, it was food. This new study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that the products and brands that are best indicators of someone being rich are things like, well, phones and mustard. Yeah, in other words, and I apologize if this sounds like a logic puzzle, having these things doesn't necessarily mean that you're rich, but if you are rich, you probably have these things. Does that make sense? The number one sign that someone's rich today is they have an iPhone. The other big signs that you're rich are you have a passport. Your car has Bluetooth and heated seats, you own an iPad, and your cell phone service is through Verizon, the most expensive of all services, I believe. The results from the same survey back in 1992 are so much cooler because back then the top sign that you were rich was you use Grey Poupon mustard. Wow. Do you have any Grey Poupon ad campaign back then? It was really, really effective. Some of the other signs that you were rich in 1992 were owning an answering machine. Ooh, using Kodak film in your camera. Wow, film in a camera. Or having a camera at all as opposed to a phone. And owning a Sylvania brand television set. Do you remember Sylvania? Because I don't. Apparently in 1992, if you had one of those, you were a baller.
Pardon me, would you have any grey Poupon?
But of course. Grey Poupon, one of life's finer pleasures.
That is it for me. Thank you so much for hanging. Thank you so much for being a part of my radio family. You make me feel like a richer individual because you and I hang out and do this every single day. If you want to make me feel even more rich, well, you can think about some of the things we talked about today on the show, about not recklessly tearing down what somebody else suggests just because they fall into a different political allegiance than you do, because they voted differently than you do. If you want to make me and the rest of America feel as though we are richer and getting closer to moving forward together, I would suggest that you go out today and you have a conversation with, maybe make a friend of, someone that believes some different stuff to you. If you really want to make me feel rich, you can follow me on Twitter at ADSXC. Have an awesome one. Later.